All right. Thank you all for being here, and welcome to Reflecting on 10 Years of Fostering Urban Farming in Springfield, Massachusetts with Ibrahim Ali. And I'm going to just hand things over to Sister Anna for one moment. She will introduce Ibrahim, and then I'm going to make a few of our usual announcements, and then we'll get started.
All right. Well, this is such an honor to be able to introduce my dear friend, my brother here in the city of Springfield, where we're both based. He's a little further up north from me now. I'm Sister Anna Muhammad. I'm the Equity Director, Food Access Coordinator for NOFA Mass. And it's my honor to introduce Ibrahim Ali, who will be our presenter today in this wonderful workshop. And just, you know, his Dun & Bradstreet is very long because he's done a great deal, and I've learned so much from him in his time with GTC and just working out in this community. But just to give you the quick overview of his many accomplishments, Ibrahim Ali is an educator, gardener, and marketing consultant. For the last 11 years, he was the co-executive director of Gardening the Community, otherwise known as GTC, a youth-based urban farm located in the Six Corners area of Springfield, which is right around the corner, literally from my house. He has presented and spoken about urban farming, food insecurity, racism in the food system, and more at NYU, Smith College, Harvard Law School, and UMass Amherst, among many, many places. Ibrahim has 6 amazing sons. In addition to being engaged in agriculture, has been independently releasing and producing hip hop music for over 20 years. He has really been a great mentor of mine in terms of working with youth. A lot of what I've been able to do with our youth program through NOFA, I've learned from him. And so it's really an honor to be able to introduce him today. And I'm looking forward to this wonderful discussion, particularly with the 50th year anniversary of NOFA Mass. GTC plays a big role in that. So definitely to present to some and introduce to others, our dear friend Ibrahim Ali. You'll be hearing from him in a few seconds, and I will give things back to Jocelyn because we have a few housekeeping items before we get quickly to his presentation. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Great, thanks, Sister Anna. All right. We want to begin, as always, with our land acknowledgement and just point out to everybody that we are presenting, attending, and hosting this workshop from land that was managed and inhabited before European colonization. Please take a moment to find your location on this map and honor those whose land you now occupy. And Sister Anna will place that in the chat in case you're not familiar with your particular area. I'm out here in Western Mass, not too far from both our host and our presenter here on Pecumtuck territory. And you can click on the link and find where you are. We also want to highlight the opportunities that you have to center racial equity in your own work, including assisting BIPOC-led organizations. Gardening the Community is among those that we suggest. Of course, there are many more, but we just wanted to provide you with some examples that we work with here at NOFA Mass. In addition, supporting legislation that will begin the talk and advance the work toward reparations. And of course, also as an ongoing effort to protect the rights of farm and food workers. We're all familiar with Zoom norms here. You're going to be muted when you come in. If you need to unmute yourself, there's a microphone icon at the bottom of the screen, and just mute yourself again once you are done speaking so that we avoid background noise. Feel free to use the chat feature to comment at any point during the workshop. So I will be keeping an eye on the chat. Just post, you know, when things come to mind, just jot them down, and then we will pause partway in and start taking questions. And I think a lot of this workshop will just be sort of conversation about whatever comes up for the participants. So definitely feel free to ask questions and chime in at any point in the chat. And then just a note, this session is being recorded for folks to watch in the future. And just a quick thank you. These are our sponsors. Without them, this conference would not be possible. We appreciate all of their support. And these are our silver sponsors. Please buy from these organizations when you have the opportunity. And as a reminder, we do have an auction going on. There are some fabulous items, including a microscope and all sorts of other fun things. So check that out. We will also paste the link in the chat. And we have a virtual vendor marketplace. You'll see in your program book, there are video messages from the vendors. So check those out between workshops. And that brings us to the end of my introduction. So I will turn things over to Ibrahim. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you very much. NOFA, Sister Anna, for that very humbling introduction. All the people who are here, here listening in, appreciate you coming by and having this conversation with me. My name's Ibrahim Ali. I have been involved with farming and thinking about the world in a different way for a long time. And my kind of reintroduction to understanding and looking at what has happened over the last few years in relation to GTC and NOFA kind of brought up a lot of different things for me. I want to just kind of give a brief outline of what we're going to do today, and that way, you know, we won't kind of veer off either left or right too much. I wanted to definitely, kind of spend some time to discussing like NOFA and the connection with NOFA and GTC and kind of how I played a part in things that have taken place over the last 10 years or so. I want to spend some time definitely kind of discussing and talking and sharing my, kind of 7 things that I feel that I really took away from being involved in the organization. And then, we could kind of do a Q&A just so we can engage with each other and kind of see what can come up with in that conversation with the larger group. So maybe it'd be best to start where it ended for me in regards to gardening the community, which was on basically the January 1st of this year, 2021. Without getting into all of the details regarding that, I would just say that from that point on, I've been involved with kind of looking and reflecting about growing food. I've taken on a position with some friends, growing medicinal marijuana for some elders in the community that want to make sure that what they're dealing with doesn't involve a lot of chemicals and stuff like that. So I've been kind of helping them figure out how best to look at that. And kind of working on music again and doing some planning for tours and things like that in different places. So I'm good, I'm breathing, I'm alive, I'm keeping things moving. GTC and NOFA have a very intimate connection. Most folks don't really know that GTC kind of had its initiated start through the use and through the auspices of folks at NOFA back in 2002. And for a number of years, kind of the important things of why this organization was founded in the first place became very infused in the understanding of how we're going to grow food at this organization in an urban setting as opposed to being out in a farm area. And I think that because of that initial launch from an organization like this, it really opened up the doors and it opened up a way to have even broader conversations about the conditions, not only of the organization and what would happen with it moving forward, but how we treat each other and how as a youth-based organization, we were going to share and assure that young people had a voice in planning and charting out how urban farming was going to be developed in our particular neighborhood. And so I think one of the most important things that happened in those early days that I wasn't necessarily around for was kind of introducing GTC to the community. And that took form in more, two different ways. The first way was the utilization of empty spaces and then turning them into productive growing areas. That's a very visual kind of transformation. And so the neighborhood, the people who lived around here began to see that there were young people doing really hard work for, not through a school, not through, not because their parents made them go, but because they really chose to be there and they wanted to get involved with something in their community. And in our neighborhood, there's not a lot of options. Young people aren't just given the keys to the bank to start becoming tellers. So the options out there are rather limited, and I will speak on that a little bit more in a few minutes. So this became one of the most viable options as far as young people getting involved with something locally that they could walk to, that they could get there in the morning, leave at the end of the day, and go home feeling like they accomplished something. This is one of the few places that allowed young people to do that. And as the years kind of progressed, that was something that continued to be highlighted, and I think really provided a real strong base for what types of things would be able to occur in the future. So through this first transition of understanding like how farming plays a role in our understanding of what type of organization we want it to be, of course, at some point, when you have a child and you nurture it and it becomes an adolescent, and then eventually that child has to be able to be let go and look and, engage in the world on its own 2 feet and to be able to stand on its own. And so, that was like the next really big progression and necessary step that needed to take place in order for the kind of development and the kind of a little bit more reflective of the neighborhood and what was happening at the time, during these times that we're living in. It becomes crucial to really have that voice from be based in the place that it's in. And so we collectively made a decision to go and be independent, and that led to a lot of other opportunities. It led to a number of challenges and obstacles that needed to be addressed. One of them being that, I can speak for myself particularly, is that, we didn't have the individual experience of running an organization independently. I think collectively, however, and this is very important to say, collectively, we had the mind space, the energy, and the ability to make that happen. And I think that was some of that actually came from looking at what NOFA was able to do, starting in Vermont and New Hampshire, and being able to spread out to the other New England states and do it independently. And I think that's a model that we embrace to a large extent. My background being in kind of independent movement of music, that was already something that I was very familiar with. And applaud my punk rock brothers and sisters out there who really kind of laid a lot of that groundwork for folks like me to learn about. And so my mindset was already kind of on that. And I think that, that was a very crucial point that we were able to get to. And it was followed by, some very challenging experiences that we had no real control over. The first one being the tornado that went through Springfield, which was either preceded or followed up by a hurricane and then a very drastic snowstorm. And so all of those things combined in like, a 6 to 7 month time span really kind of made us reevaluate and presented, ironically, an opportunity to grow that may or may not have been there had these events not taken place. I was looking at some photographs of the tornado this morning, just to kind of jog my memory a little bit. And, it's obviously not the kind of destruction that's you see taking place in the West Coast now with the fires. And it wasn't like we had a T5 hurricane or a tornado come through here. But when I looked at some of these pictures again, and particularly the house of one of the youth that worked with us, the destruction was pretty bad. I mean, if you ever get a chance to look at some of those images, if you haven't already, please take a look and just to get a sense of what it is I'm describing here. And so that event and the subsequent things that happened weather-wise created some difficulty that was followed up by some opportunity. And I think the opportunity was, okay, so now that we're in this situation, we need to think about how we can step up our ability to provide more for the neighborhood. And that led us to think bigger. One of the things that happened was we had a important conversation about goals, strategic goals for the organization moving forward from 2011 period, and what we wanted to see and do. And one of the most important things that we wanted to do was to buy more space, buy more land. Another important thing was, we wanted to create some kind of store or some sort of ability to sell food and have a space for the folks in the neighborhood, other organizations, for people to be able to meet and, get involved with the conversation of food justice in Springfield. And so, when you kind of have a destruction or fire, whatever, the kind of that initial shock is always, very devastating and very emotional and very, you think about what you're missing and what you lost and et cetera, et cetera. And then, you hope or you get to a point where you want to begin to think about the future. And so we did purchase that land that I spoke about. We did go through a process of thinking about how we would develop it. And we did end up being able to build structures that reflected not only the neighborhood, but and the growth that we felt that we wanted to help people visualize in a neighborhood. But also, like, we really were making the strides to be able to provide more, more interaction with the neighborhood, more opportunities for people to get fresh produce, and more ways and opportunities for the young people to take part in something a little bit more than simply, growing food and biking to a market to sell once, or twice a week. That's where we started off at. We were selling food right on the corner of where our gardens were at. And we, over this course of these, of time here, we grew to the point where now there's a small store. And, when I think about that 10 years or the 11 years that I was a part of GTC, what I see are young people. I'm very proud and, enamored of what the organization, and I'm kind of stepping out of it for a moment, but to say that, we started off in these empty spaces, and then we were able to produce something that's really helpful for the people in the community, and hopefully will be, will stay there well after, all of the people who were involved with it are gone and what have you. Like, to have this idea that that's something that's going to be there for the neighborhood, hopefully to continue to give and provide food. There's not much more you can ask for. Well, there's more you can ask for, of course, but I think that particularly the young people that were involved in this process and were, took part in these things that happened, I can't thank them enough. I think they are the reason why we were able to think that big, because we had young people that were amazing people, young folks that were invested in themselves, their families, and the community. And so I wanted to now really give my kind of the 7 things that I felt were, there's been a lot of impactful things that happened with me, of course, over this length of time, but I wanted to just kind of give some reflection about the 7 things that I felt were that I really grew from my involvement with GTC, and to a large extent NOFA, even without them, kind of us being in the organization. NOFA and my engagement with NOFA has always been a positive thing for me. So with that said, the first thing that I feel that I really gained from these 10 years is the sense of what it means to be free, right? Malcolm X said that freedom is something you have to do for yourself. You can't just be given it. And so, I mean, I thought, growing up and prior to my involvement with GTC and NOFA, that I was, I'm free, But what I kind of engaged in, these conversations, I realized that, confinement is not necessarily with chains and what have you, but also it's with of your mind, confinement in your mind. And so to really be free, you have to to have the ability to be free. Your body has to have the right, your body has to be able to not be concerned with trying to fix itself from your intake of things that are really trying to break it down and destroy it. You have to kind of be able to be physically able to think about what it means to be a man, a human being, a whatever you want to call yourself in 2021. Like you have to kind of combat the environment to a certain extent. Nowadays, depending on where you live, like you're in combat with the environment, your body is. And so, you know, to really be free, we have to be able to eat correctly. And it doesn't mean that your dinner plate has to look like a tofu, you know, explosion. Um, but what it does mean is knowing that if you have first the opportunity and you can afford to pay for food that you know is not containing chemicals that are, again, you know, meant to break down your body. um, like you have to be able to have those sorts of inputs, um, without having to go through, you know, a bunch of hoops in order to attain that. um, that kind of freedom is not necessarily just given to us in 2021 in the United States of America. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which I can't go into right now. Perhaps that's something that we could discuss in the future. But for communities that reflect the kind of spaces that I've been in, um, those sorts of choices are tend to be few and far in between. And I learned a lot about that in terms of what I've seen by going to other places around the world, really, for GTC, and communicating with people and talking with people and learning that, yo, not only does it suck living in Mason Square and trying to eat healthy, but it sucks in you know, my hometown of Brooklyn, New York. It sucks in Oakland. It's sad in Richmond, in Baltimore, et cetera, et cetera. Difficulties in Cuba, despite what we've learned. Um, and so, you know, I've understood what that means to be free a lot more specifically from my involvement with GTC and NOFA. One of the other most keys that I got, the second one I think is patience. Um, you know, having young people and working with young people and having children myself, patience, when they say patience is a virtue, I can't really underscore how important and true that is. You know, there's so many times working with young people and growing food and whatnot, like you're here and you know the young people or the person you're engaged with is here and you want them to be with you like in a day or in an hour, but sometimes that process takes a little bit more time and you really have to be patient with where people are and meet them where they are in order for both of you to be able to grow. And I think that the way that I looked at the young people in regards to this concept of patience is I looked at it like that. Like when we're together, for however long we're together for, it's an opportunity for us to grow and learn together. And I always allowed myself and other people to be patient and to learn to forgive and get to that point so that we could accomplish said goals, whatever they may have been. But that key word, patience, um, extended to the people, the souls the people we were around, and it also extended to how we were treating the earth. Um, you know, there's things you can do to speed up certain processes, to boost certain processes that of course are natural, and then there's things that you can do to do the same thing using chemicals and things of that nature. Oftentimes the more holistic way to do it is going to be a little bit longer. But what happens or tends to be the case in many respects is those processes that require you to be patient reap the most rewards. So patience, that was one of the other important things that I got. The third thing that I really gained from being with GTC was learning about the complexity of the neighborhood and our neighbors. On any given day and working in the Six Corners Mason Square area, you're going to see people with severe health issues. You're going to see people with severe mental issues. You're going to see folks with very dire economic situations. Um, and there's a guy by the name of Gabor Mate, and he talks about the connection between stress and disease. And I think in our neighborhood, like it becomes crystal clear what those connections are. In addition to the fact that kind of the way that the health system is kind of leaning toward is really making those connections, and that's something that I feel has taken place over this 10-year period that I was with GTC. Like people really beginning to understand, like stress in your life plays a huge role in how your body and your mind reacts to the environment. And I think that kind of way of looking at health has been a positive thing. I feel like under the current, the last year and a half, one of the things that I've seen, in addition to being able to count 24 or more folks that have passed away as a result of this pandemic, is that the situation is now like magnified by like 10. And our neighborhood, our city, our state has not been immune to the kind of we're not immune to the indications that something is very wrong. And perhaps there's no longer any band-aids that can be put on these situations. Like now is the time for some really aggressive changes in how we are dealing with our most fragile people in the society. I'm not sure if the current regime here in the United States is ready to deal with that kind of stuff, but I know that organizations like GTC, like NOFA, are kind of, or should be looked at as potential examples of what can happen and what should be happening in a broader scale, and how people should be investing more in these types of thinking, this type of thinking and philosophy, and kind of that, and what should be available to folks. But that kind of the complexity of what goes on and what takes place on a daily basis is one of the things that, being in a neighborhood and living there, you see it, but it's like it's not really as when you're on the corner on a day-to-day basis working the land, and you're able to interact with people because you're there, and it's not like you go to work somewhere else. Like the work was right there, so the conversations and the getting to know people and the seeing the need that was taking place, not when the lights were on, in terms of like when we have events on the site and there was a lot of people there, and speeches were being made, and that's all good and everything, but there's the times when there's nobody around necessarily, or it's just a couple of youth, and we have people coming to the site expressing some need, that is something you don't forget. So that the complexity of the neighborhood was important for me to see and to engage with. And I want to say, despite all of that, our community was extremely supportive of these young people in the neighborhood, extremely supportive. And they did things that I don't necessarily need to point out or talk about because it was by their own, blessing that they wanted to do it. So that's between them and what they did. But folks really don't necessarily always know some of the things that happened or some of the people who were involved in making sure that the space that we had was kept safe. And that part of it, again, the support of the neighborhood, you can't measure that. It's immeasurable. So the fourth thing that I really got from being involved with GTC and was, being involved with hip hop music, underground hip hop music, I should say, which is not necessarily what is definitely not what when you turn on or however you listen to music, it's not representative necessarily of what is promoted out there. So it's kind of outside of the mainstream, right? And so being involved with hip hop, I thought I was like outside of the mainstream with my thinking until I learned and started really dealing with farmers. And then I realized, wow, these people are far out, and in a good way. I met and began to understand the role that farmers have played in like the civil rights movement, and the struggle with in Jim Crow, internationally in Brazil and India. Like, farmers really, really play a huge role and have played a huge role in revolution, whether it be in any of the places and the things that I mentioned, but also just creating community in these different spaces that allowed for conversations and things to take place that led to these things. And so I learned that, just how crucial farmers have been in this growth that our country and other places have gone through. And, to me, that has been eye-opening, to say the least. Some of the understanding and things that have that I've gotten from NOFA conferences have been life changing, and that myself, I can speak for myself, like I've passed on that information to other people. I know our young people have passed that on to other people, and so that effect of that mushroom effect of growing and kind of organically from one person to the next, which is how things happen. You know I wouldn't have gotten that without my involvement with these two organizations. The fifth thing I wanted to talk about was the resiliency of the youth themselves. We must have seen over the 10-year span of my involvement with GTC, at least 100 or 200 youth coming through our space. And I think that would be a fair number. Maybe somebody can correct me at some point. But when I speak about resiliency, I think about all those young people who, sweated out those summers with us, who watched things attempt to be grown that were, that failed, that were there making calls, that were there when we needed them to kind of talk about things that they might have been completely uncomfortable being in the public space to discuss, but they did it. And I can't think of any situation where things kind of went left. I've been around youth, working with young people for a long time in different states, and I could say that to be able to say that there hasn't been an incident where a young person really kind of went off the cliff in terms of things they may have said or done or whatever, that's amazing. And I can't say that about other spaces I've been in. So the youth from GTC have a very kind of, I think over the years, like they have, a battery is put in their back once they get involved or have gotten involved with GTC and other kind of things that have sprung from organizations like ours and the organizations that ours was based on. I can attest to the fact that, these young people that are involved with food, and then being involved with food kind of are involved with you have to be in understanding of politics and science and math and all these different things. And I think that they take that information, all the things that they've gained, and they run with it, many of them. Not everyone that leaves or that I know of that has left GTC went on to become farmers necessarily. Not all of them, decided that they wanted to become, scientists or something. But what I've seen is that they are fully engaged in first themselves and invested in their own success. They're not out here. I haven't seen any indication of any of the youth that have been involved with GTC that then go on and really become induced into a life of crime or anything like that. And we've had young people that were coming from very difficult situations. Many of them, I can think of a couple actually in my mind right now that were involved with some organizational type of gangs or whatever, but kind of stepped away from that from their involvement with GTC. And I'm not saying that every person or that's a kind of this is the way to success. But hopefully, and I think it has demonstrated that it is a way to keep young people from being engaged in things that are very detrimental to their future. Um, you know, there's so many young folks that I could, that I picture right now that, have shared with us very heartbreaking stories of their situation. And they have expressed to me how much it meant for them to be able to be in an organization like this and to have a space that was theirs, um, you know, 4-5 times a week, every week consistently. Um, so that's very important, this idea of the resiliency of the young people. Another thing that I felt that I felt was important was this idea of our elders and our young people being disconnected. And I think in an organization like this, that aspect of being able to engage with young people and being able to have our elders meet these folks on their level at the same time, have conversations with them and being able to talk with them. And sometimes, our elders, they can be a little testy. Um, and I think in each instance, when I think of those times, that happened, these young people that we worked with demonstrated incredible, again, patience with our elders. And so over the years, what I've seen is like our, GTC youth on a consistent basis, working with our elders, providing them with food, getting that gratification of knowing that they did something that, you know, was very unique and incredibly helpful. It changes what you think about your community. You know, I trust that our elders, and I've heard them express this when I've done presentations in the past at different community groups. They see the youth what they're doing, and they really, I think change their the way that they engage with young people as a result. Um, if there were, you know, 10 GTC type or like organizations in the city of Springfield, I think that that would be kind of a benchmark that would produce tremendous results. Um, and if there was a way to make that happen, I would hope that that would be something that would be pursued by anybody on this line here who can get to governments and to express that. But this idea of the community being reintroduced through the farming and the food was unprecedented in my experiences of working with young people. Most of the time in the spaces that I worked in previously before GTC were like, we were with young people in a specific place. We did certain things with them. It's really kind of focused on them, and they were good, organizations in and of themselves, but there wasn't the kind of interaction with the community that we were able to achieve with GTC. And I think I wanted to really make sure that I highlighted that because it was something that was close to me. I thought it was something I really learned a lot from. The last thing that I want to mention of what I gained from kind of being involved with GTC was humility, and kind of being humble about the work. There's been few instances when I reflect on a time there where someone would come to the site and kind of be a little passive aggressive in terms of their questions, in terms of how we were doing things, the young people, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that in those moments where you want to kind of maybe let people know exactly what you're thinking, it's super important to look inside and figure out how you can lower yourself in order to allow for you to see what it is that this person is needs or is suffering from or is kind of what is their deal. I think when when I would have to engage in those situations where people were a little aggressive, one of the things that I was kind of consistently reminded of being a Muslim is that, when somebody's coming at you with, with ignorance, the best way to deal with them is to address them in words of peace. And so that's what I showed, particularly the young people in those instances, because there were a few times when things could have gone a little bit left or right. Just based on how aggressive or how angered or how whatever the person who was coming with us may have been. And, it's super important in a neighborhood like ours and in a community like ours where people do have weapons, that you know how to de-escalate situations. And that first and foremost takes you as an individual to be able to humble yourself. And I think that that's the example that we as an organization were able to convey to our young people, so that there weren't, instances where, young people who maybe have a little bit less patience for certain types of conversations where, the standard was laid. And so we never had anything escalate to any point where it became violent or, police were called or anything like that. So I can't say that is something that is the norm for organizations like ours around the country, because I know of some times in spaces where there were some difficult things that took place. But generally speaking, kind of peace is the way forward. That's the way to be. And GTC allowed me to really reflect on that in a way that was incredibly strong over the years. I want to thank everybody for listening. I hope they enjoyed the few pictures that I did have, and perhaps would be a great time right now for us to see if there's any specific questions or statements or whatever that people might want to make regarding the work that they may have seen us do over the years, or just anything that has sparked something in your mind that we could discuss. I'm very open to that. I don't know, Jocelyn or Sister Anna, if you want to direct the questions or see if we can pick up from what we have people listening here.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your overview and insights and reflections. I have a lot of comments and questions, but I just want to open it up to folks who want to either, we're just small enough group here that I feel like we could just, folks want to just come off of mute. They could just chime in directly with any comments. So I'm just going to pause for a minute, and if folks want to come off of mute, and if you want to join with video or not join with video, that's fine. Feel free to jump in.
Jocelyn, maybe I can start the ball rolling while people are thinking right now. Ibrahim, wonderful talk. And I got a chance to witness some of that firsthand. So it's really a blessing to hear you just really talk about those 7 things that you learned. If you can give us a quick overview of the youth that came through GTC, some of the ages that you worked with, and then also maybe give some overview of the neighborhood. Some folks may be familiar with the Mason Square area in Springfield, but if you can go maybe a little bit more into depth about what that makeup is, those different neighborhoods where the youth are coming from.
So I think I had a little thing mute on my thing. You said the first thing was talk about the youth in terms of what?
The ages that came through GTC, through that 100 to 200 that you mentioned. What were those ages? Because it's good to know kind of the spectrum that you touched, and also go into a little bit about what that neighborhood looks like. You've got 6 Corners. I live in Old Hill. What is that Mason Square area? I think those 2 things would be a great way to start off this part of the conversation.
Cool. So the young folks that we had coming through varied in ages. Most of them would probably start like around, we would take, I remember seeing kids as young as like 11. But then up to, I would say 18 or so, kind of their first, second year college. But not middle school to first, second year college. I think after like the second year, most folks, kind of went on to do a lot of other things, but that's generally the age range. And
Yeah.
the neighborhood, the neighborhood is, it's mostly residential. There's a few kind of restaurants, little bodega stores, those kind of small supermarkets. Now, what is kind of over the last 3 years or so, there's been one kind of dollar store that was built, which is kind of reflective of, a lot of neighborhoods in Springfield like ours. A lot of these little dollar stores come into play. It's a very walkable neighborhood in terms of their sidewalks. for people, you know, there's the bus route is is kind of very direct in the neighborhood. It's not you know, it's not necessarily the type of neighborhood where you're gonna find like, at least not anymore, like, you know, at a certain time, like a bunch of people will come out at night and just be wilding out and stuff. It's not that kind of neighborhood, although there was a time when at night there would be a lot of people at the corner store right there, not the corner store, the little restaurant joint. But that didn't necessarily result in a bunch of, you know, incidences. But it's a residential kind of relatively busy neighborhood. I mean, there's always kind of a lot of foot traffic and things where we're at. And I think my sense is that being so close to the city center, you know, it allowed for a few neighborhoods to kind of converge into the space that we're at. So that's one of the other real benefits of where we were, is that it wasn't like a, you know, kind of, it wasn't way off in, you know, in the outskirts of the city, like in terms of some of the urban farms that I know about. They tend to be, you know, kind of maybe a little bit outside of the city center, but we're very close to the city center and on a very frequented traffic neighborhood. So that's kind of like the landscape of the space. And as a result of the tornado, I would say that there's a little bit less trees in the neighborhood, although that has kind of changed over the last 4 or 5 years since that time took place. But, you know, you can still see the ramifications of that event. It's still kind of visible in the landscape.
Yeah, thanks for painting that picture for us. I want to see if we can just go back to the issue of the age range, because that sort of relates to one of the questions that I was going to ask. Just thinking about how youth sort of, you know, grow and then phase out of the program. And I know, you know, when I've worked with youth, it's always, you know, that first year or so, it's just a lot of getting oriented and getting the hang of things. And then you build relationships and they build skills and they build confidence. I mean, that's an amazing thing that you see from, you know, age 14 to 18 or whatever the age may be. And then they have a lot more, you know, skills and confidence. And then you're saying, you know, they're moving on, maybe they're going to college or getting a job. And I always wonder, like, how do we maybe provide more continuity so that they do come back? And that's been something that Sister Anna and I have been talking about at NOFA. Like, how can we move toward, you know, creating paid internships and then paid staff positions for the youth in her program? And we have started, you know, setting aside some funds for that. And so it's sort of a big conversation that we will be having this fall as we start budgeting for next year. And I also just want to sort of connect this to what you started with in terms of GTC's relationship with NOFA and the importance of the program being run by the folks who live in the neighborhood, right? I mean, that, you know, it's nice to have folks from NOFA all over the state, you know, involved, but really when you're talking about a very local project, you've got to have representation from the community. And so we've been talking about that in terms of the food access program that Sister Anna runs as well, like to provide that ongoing representation from the community. We need to find the funds to pay folks in the community. And, you know, if we wanted to expand, we can't duplicate Sister Anna and make her, you know, expand her work to, you know, infinitely. And so we need others to step in. And, you know, obviously Andrew has been amazing at stepping in and sharing a lot of her work. And, you know, some of our conversation has been, how do we find those funds? How do we prioritize that and really create employment and like good, well-paid employment so that, you know, a 20-year-old, a 22-year-old wants to come back and be part of the program. So I was just wondering if you wanted to reflect on that, if you've had any thoughts about that in terms of GTC or other similar programs.
Okay, so that's a lot. That's a lot. Thank you. So I think one of the things that I think we did that I would, you know, encourage you to do is to ask the youth what they want. You know, they can express to you what the parameters should be or could be in terms of what they would accept or what they think is reasonable for being having a paid internship. So you know, like, I don't think you necessarily have to compete with, you know, the jobs that are out there on a even keel. Like, you know, if the opportunity to work at McDonald's is, you know, $10 an hour, you don't have to say, yeah, we're going to give you $10 an hour. But I think that you know, you can figure out a way, once you know what the goal is, how to achieve it, you know. One of the things that we did and that we struggled with for many years, and that, you know, over time we kind of created some sort of equilibrium, was, you know, what what is this work worth? And I don't want to be assuming that the, you know, that if we could give that there's a fixed number for the kind of work that is being done, which is very difficult. You know, under farming is not easy work, and it should be compensated correctly. I think NOFA and like your presentation about appreciating the farm workers and those folks who do this work and actually allow us to, you know, have the food in the first place. You know, we need to turn that paradigm on its head, because, you know, this work demands you be paid correctly, so you can actually do it without putting the risk of yourself and your ability to take care of yourself at, you know, in jeopardy. That's another conversation. So I think, you know, just in terms of the young people, we asked them, well, what would be a reasonable stipend to receive? And once we got that number, um, you know, we had super cool and amazing staff and Richmond, and other folks who figured out, well, okay, so if this is the goal, then we need to figure out how we're going to attain that goal financially so that we can provide for the young people. And I think that our kind of community in terms of Western Massachusetts, and then everyone that we were connected with on an individual basis, and, you know, we reached out to a lot of people and told our story, which allowed them to see the investment that they would make as being an important and a viable one. Because we didn't say, yeah, you know, if you give us $1,000, you know, we're gonna, you know, I don't know, build the Taj Mahal. What we did say was that, you know, your $1,000 is going to go toward providing stipends for these young people, which is going to allow them to provide the things that the neighborhood is lacking. And I think that when you're hitting all of these different kind of points of reference that people know are some of the issues in our community, and you're able to say, yeah, we can touch on young people in terms of their ability to know about this with your contribution. We can affect health with your contribution. We can affect, you know, mental instability with this contribution by providing the good food. You know, so the story of the organization and the story of what you can do at NOFA with your young people can be a similar story, because you can say that you're touching all of these aspects of human life that are like crucial to making the community a better place to be. And so, you know, when you are able to kind of articulate that story, or get the young people to be able to articulate that story, I feel the money will come. You know, once you're introduced or you're put in front of those people who can provide that funding or provide that grant, or, you know, are interested in contributing in other ways, not necessarily with money, but in other ways that are equally important. Once you tell that story, you know, at least in the community, like in New England and other places that I've been to, people will respond. But you have to be willing to tell that story, and that takes time. You know what I'm saying? That takes, you know, you got to do things, and you got to, you know, you got to be able to be in different spaces. And another thing, real quick, that was important. Anywhere I went, one of the things that Ann will always tell me, like, make sure you ask how they're getting funded. You know, what are they doing to make sure that they are able to continue to do what it is that they're doing in that particular place. And I think that being able to do that every time we went to different, I mean, I was doing that when I was in Cuba. We was doing that when I was in Florida, when I would go to Milwaukee, the Growing Power, when I would, go to wherever I was at, that I made sure, and I always would remember, well, how do you guys fund all of this work here? And I think if you can do that, you can be effective.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. I see Andrew and Anne popping up here. Andrew, did you want to chime in with something?
Anne? Speaker Anne? There she goes.
Yeah, no, I think this is a time for me to listen. I'm new at GTC and I've taken on a role there, and I've already grown some of the love that Ibrahim is speaking about with the youth. And we see Ibrahim all over the site in many ways. I'll discover a bag of sawdust and I'm like, what's going on here? And oh, Ibrahim had the thing going on with mushrooms and mycelium, and so I think that he's dropped a lot of jewels, and I think in a space like this, it's time for people like me to soak it up and try to be a part and continue what the legacy has been. And I think the kids, they all, anytime your name comes up, they speak of you in high regard. So I'm sure that's something you already know, but I think it's something you should hear.
Thank you, appreciate that. I'll take all of that for sure.
Thanks.
Can I pick?
Anne.
Yeah, I had the amazing pleasure of working with Ibrahim for those, I don't know, 9 of those 10 years or 10 of those 11 years or whatever it was. And I think, speaking both as a coworker and colleague, but also as a parent, the impact that he had on my kids who came up through the program and was pretty profound. And I guess, Ibrahim, if you could talk a little bit more, I think one of the things that you're just so amazing at is centering youth leadership development, kind of centering the voice of young people in all that you do, but also kind of structuring that into the organization and into your work. And then, maybe also talking a little bit more about specifics of how you do. I can remember like so many examples of when you halted me from moving too fast because young people were not, at the heart of the process. But also, how you brought racism, understanding racism, and making sure that we were, developing young people who were understanding of the racism in the structures and institutions around them, and able to, kind of develop their own analysis of that, how you thought about youth leadership in that context.
Anne is somebody who I love dearly. And I miss you very much, Anne Richmond. I just want you to know that. I think about you all the time.
I know it.
So I think one of the things that that helped me kind of think about, youth programs and things like that, and the way that hopefully I hope was effective was first, like, I was involved with a lot of things as a young person in the city of Springfield. They weren't always good, you know what I mean? But in terms of my participation, like, I wasn't always the person, the young, because it was like me and my cousins, and we would just whatever. But we would do these different things, what's that thing? Junior achievement and the Key Club and all that. So I was that kind of guy. And one of the things that I learned as a young person was that we really didn't have a lot of say in what was going on. There was just a lot of always, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. What do you and then there was not really a lot of interaction in terms of like what kind of input we would have. Over the years, as working in different organizations, I saw the same thing. Young people not really given, and I'm talking about working in organizations that dealt with young people and young people's issues. I never really saw a lot of young people involved with the decision-making processes. And that always rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. And so I feel like as, when I was able to kind of be allowed the opportunity to run something myself or to kind of make those decisions, I always felt it was important to really focus my energy on assuring that young folks had some involvement in the decision-making process. It makes things a lot easier to have everybody buy into a choice and buy into a concept if they are choosing or have some idea that they made the choice to learn about it. I think there's ways that you can play with that so that you can give them what you think they need. At the same time, they perceive it as a choice that they made to participate in that particular thing. That there's a thin line with that, but it's very it's kind of the way that I would, as an adult, you want to be able to not just have rules and things dictated to you. You want to have some space to be free, and exercise your own ability and your own choices and your own knowledge that you have, and share that with others. So I think that was one of the things that was really crucial, kind of early on, and moving forward with that. But then, when I think about, being the fact that the issue of, and again, I'm going to just speak about the United States. I'm not going to speak about other places. When we start talking about this country, I know that guy. When we start talking about the United States, like, and farming, you can't ignore racism and race. You just can't. And we would have been doing a disservice to our young people all these years if we didn't really give them the context to understand the space that they're in, and the context to understand like what can happen when things go wrong for them in the kind of environment that we live in. And how important it is for them to look at all of the institutions that they take apart, that they're a part of, school, food system stuff, and question how it is that things are the way that they are. Because everything that we're dealing with as a society, most of the things that we're dealing with as a society, are things that we as human individuals have created the issue. We've created these problems. I'm not gonna say that they weren't always with us, but in many respects, like, things have gotten the way that they are because choices have been made that have led us down this road. And in order for our young people to understand, particularly if you look like me and if you kind of, having to navigate some of the pressures that are very apparent to you as a young person growing up in a city like Springfield, or in Florida, Atlanta, whatever. Like, when you are witness to some of the things that can happen on a day-to-day basis, your level of freedom, your ability to develop as a young person is severely impaired by your environment and the kind of things that occur in your environment. And if you're not given any kind of tools to help you navigate and understand that of what's going on, you can really become not only a detriment to yourself, but also a detriment to the community. And so, I don't think we ever went about our work blindly, or as though racism doesn't play a huge or doesn't have an impact on our day-to-day existence. The fact that our organization had to exist at all really speaks to the level of where we're at, whether it's in Springfield or any other place. I mean, to be honest with you, organizations like this really shouldn't have to exist. I mean, not necessarily engaging with young people and growing food as a vocation or as a activity, but just the kind of the underlying need for us to exist really speaks tremendously to where we're at as a society. And we failed. We failed our young people. We failed many communities in this country. We're failing consistently. We're failing. And so, the work that was done over these last 10 years, and hopefully the work that's done over the next 10, I hope really reflects on people coming together and really tackling those issues head on, and being relentless about the fact that this is the right way. These are the kind of things that we should be doing for our young people. This is what the community deserves after being neglected or not having these, this type of food available. It speaks on a lot of different things that reflect the fact that we have come, a relatively far in terms of our look at, in terms of how, the food justice is kind of changing the society as a whole. But I think it also is an indication of just how far we've fell off, and I do think that at some point, at some point, I'm hoping that the young people have not just kind of gone through the program or programs like ours and just kind of gotten in some information and just kind of, okay, well, this is the same way that I've learned chemistry in high school. This is not going to have any use for me. For some, some folks might say that, but I hope that when they've come through us, like they've taken these lessons and they actually have implemented them in their lives. And I think that that's what has taken place for many of the young folks.
Yeah, thank you. I was a high school teacher for many years, and I can appreciate the fact that a huge amount of working with youth, or really with anybody, but particularly with that age group, is that relationship building. And I know that Sister Anna is great with that, and just sort of serving as a guidance counselor and a support person, in addition to teaching skills around gardening and science and soil and all sorts of other things. And it's a really big piece of that work. I can definitely appreciate that. We have time for a few more questions. Sister Anna, do you want to jump in, or turn it over to others?
I really quickly, and Jocelyn, you're really kind at that, because I'm still struggling and working at that myself. But one of the things I appreciated in observing Ibrahim in that time is how he was able to have the youth cultivate their love and care for the community. So it's kind of a two-part question. What are some of the best ways, especially when the youth would come brand new, have no idea about what's going on in the community, or they don't know themselves what they're trying to, what's happening with them? How did you develop and cultivate that in them, that care for the community, that care for making sure that the community eats well, all that I got a chance to witness? So what are some of your pearls of wisdom in terms of how you got that, how you got the youth to get involved at that level? And also reaching the youth when they just are trying to figure out life. What is the meaning of life for them in whatever circumstance they may be? Those are some of the things that I witnessed that was totally amazing for me. And doing the best I can to try to emulate that. But what are some of your pearls in those two areas?
Thank you again, Sister Anna, for that. I think, one thing that has to happen in terms of kind of achieving those two things, the first thing would be is you have to show love and care for the community and the people in the community. It has to start with you. Like they have to see that. They have to know that, you know, like if, you know, sometimes if somebody comes in the, you know, in the space and they're like, you know, for lack of a better word, maybe they're suffering from a couple, you know, some mental stress or what have you. And not to be like, oh, here comes this one, you know what I mean? But, you know, you can kind of express things. And if young people see how you talk about a community or how you talk about a person or how you talk about a concept, whatever, if they see that, and if you show them something that it doesn't express humility or doesn't express, what's the word, empathy, then they're going to be like, oh, if he doesn't have to do it, I don't have to do it, right? So I would take the time to talk to the, you know, those people in the neighborhood, whether they were, you know, addicts or having any kind of difficulty. I would, that guy's, he comes over to the space, give him some water and, you know, let him have, you know, give him an apple, let him be on his way. You know what I mean? And I think those little things, when the young people see that you have care for people who most people would disregard, you know, I think about like how, you know, there's people who talk about having care for a certain community, or they talk about being supportive of certain people. I'm thinking particularly, I hate to get political, but somebody like Nancy Pelosi, who will put on, you know, kente cloth and, you know, who won't debate anyone about her position, but she'll at the same time will discuss and talk about the people as though she possesses them, or though she knows them and what have you. Like you can't know people and possess them, or they become yours based on your talk. Like you have to show it. And I think that that is the, you know, kind of the crucial thing that as any person that has to be involved with groups of young people, like again, like you have to show the kind of activity and the behavior you want to see be pulled out of them, because there's no young person that doesn't want to do good. There's no young person that was born bad. Like I don't believe in none of that. You know what I'm saying? I think that circumstances cause people to react in ways that might not be beneficial to themselves or their family and community. And in many respects, probably the young people are acting out, and they're doing it correctly, because that is what anyone would do in faced with certain circumstances. They're going to act out in a certain way, and it's understandable behavior if you begin to peel away some of the things and some of the layers that, you know, you get when you get to know someone. You know, you can peel away some of those layers and you can actually see the person for who they are. And so I think that that's one of the things like that's important, is to be able to demonstrate the kind of behavior that you want to see and you want to bring out in the young folks. And then as far as like, you know, kind of letting young, you know, newer young people kind of create some, you know, space for them that they can get involved with, and they can appreciate or want to kind of continue to come to. I think it's a few things. I think first, you know, it's important that the young people who are already with you and that you're already kind of working with, that they become the ambassadors for the other young people. You know, I think in many respects, like I try to step out of the way and allow the young people to step up in terms of how we dealt with recruiting and, you know, interactions with folks. My first inclination is, okay, I could do that particular thing. I could introduce a young person to the program, but I would rather one of their peers do it first, let them engage with that new person, and then I can come and follow up with my spiel or with my, you know, whatever I think I need to do in order to make somebody feel comfortable in the space that we're in. You know, there shouldn't be any, you know, a lot of, you know, putting down of the people and sarcastic kind of, snarky remarks and, things that don't bring people together as an adult, they definitely don't work with young people, and they definitely don't work with young people of color because they're not having it. Like you're going, if you come at certain young people the wrong way, like you're gonna feel it in some kind of way. Either, God forbid, it could be a physical thing, or it could just be like a verbal lashing that could be very disrespectful. And so I've learned that it just doesn't, and I never like to be spoken to in ways that were not respectful, just in general. Not that it's all about respect, but it's, there's a certain way that I feel like it's important to communicate with adults, and you want to give that same reciprocity to young people and not just think that you as the adult got the answers all the time. I mean, we do have a lot of the answers, but we don't have all of the answers. And I think that, again, this goes back to my keys of the 10 years of being humble and having humility. Like that goes a long way in terms of dealing with young people, and particularly young people in communities like ours where they're not seen. The general societal consensus is we don't really see our young Black and Latino and Asian young people, generally speaking, unless it's like those one or two stars that, are on the basketball team, or those one or two young people who, did a spelling bee or something. Like those are the stars, but there's a vast majority of young people that are largely ignored. And so we want to not necessarily say that everybody's a star or everybody's whatever, but just to give them that, have the humility to talk to people in a way that shows that you not only you care about yourself, but you care about them. And that goes a long way.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a nice note to end on. So I think we can obviously continue this conversation into the future. I think there's a lot more that we could say if we had a whole nother hour here. But thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. It's really great to have you here at the NOFA Summer Conference. And thank you to everybody who has participated. I think we have a couple links to post in the chat here, and I will leave the Zoom running for a few minutes if anybody has any final comments, and then we'll take a lunch break. Thank you so much, Ibrahim. Thank you, Sister Anna, for co-hosting with me.
Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate y'all, and hope to see everyone soon again.